all it is a weird kind of twist on how you place the words together.
It is, but I won't get shut down,
right.
and the conversation continues.
Right.
And so there are words like, cannabis versus marijuana. There are words like adult use versus recreational. Adult use implies responsibility. It implies all these other things where recreational.
It's like party.
It's a good time.
Well, recreational, you think camping. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh, we're just going to go out in the woods and get fucking hammered. Like, versus like adult use. I'm just going to use consumer. It's kind of like sold the liquor ads where it's like, use responsibly.
That's
what I mean? We're doing the water break, the commercial where they're just brought to you by. Pound and beers, and it's like water break, and they just hand out the water for everybody to hydrate so that you don't pass out.
And then even strain, like we said earlier, right? Strain has everything to do with viruses and bacteria, nothing to do with botanics or horticulture. So, why the industry even uses that is crazy. But as we start to normalize and as things start to globalize, we need to talk the language of researchers and scientists and politicians and doctors and policymakers in order for them to understand where we're coming from, and in order for them to understand that this is a plant which has therapeutic value, and it's really important for us to have that conversation instead of, the typical stoner talk, which always leads us to a place where you go from, do you use marijuana, then it goes into abuse, then it goes back into, it's the gateway drug.
What's really funny is it used to just be weed. You know what I mean? Like, nobody even used these big words like cannabis and marijuana. It was like, I'm just going to go buy some weed. You know what I mean? Or like, I think there's it's good to see the evolution of that to like where at least now we're using multiple syllable words that like, versus like weed, dope, smoke, trees, bud, weed. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Well, it takes a little more effort.
Yeah. And we are back here with Mita Unshackled at the Lucky Leaf Expo here in Minnesota. And we are going total brutal, get to the chopper. Everybody get down, come with us if you want to live. I have some very good guests here with me. My best friend from another mother.
I'm playing Danny DeVito's character.
I thought that's who I was.
Wait.
Oh.
This was an Arnold.
It's not a tumor.
Arnold sandwich.
I'll be Carl Weathers. But and I'm Tom, Cannabis Legalization News, here with another Mita Unshackled live from Lucky Leaf, and David is joining us. David, how do I pronounce your last name?
Palashuk.
Palashuk. David Palashuk.
Not to be confused with Paladnek, right?
Correct.
Okay.
He's somebody different.
Because that was when I first thought, I was like, dude, you wrote Fight Club?
No,
that's awesome.
Palahniuk.
Right. I don't know how to pronounce his name either, but you have a really good last name. As somebody who has a very unique last name, like I appreciate guys with unique last names that people have to ask how you pronounce your last name.
I'm a little offended.
Why?
Howard.
He has two first names.
It's two first names.
Yeah, but that gives you like a really cool alias because you can be like Howard Thomas and be like, and it totally changes your whole personality. You could be like, I am Howard Thomas. And then you're like, Thomas Howard, the attorney, and then like your alter ego comes out as.
Let's turn this.
All right, here we go.
Back
Back to Chuck
How
here.
do we do marketing for cannabis?
Yes, let's talk about that.
David, I've been meaning to ask you that. Marketing for cannabis. Can I? Is that possible?
You can do anything you want, I'm sure of it.
Look at that.
It's just so inspiring. So inspiring.
You can do anything you want.
Yeah. It's really what you want to do. Can you do it? I think you can.
I'm going to try to market the cannabis. The nice thing about marketing cannabis is the product is usually pretty good, and people like to buy it.
That's true. Yeah. Most cultivators say it sells itself.
Yeah, until they figure out how to sell it. I actually have had that conversation with people. I have a product that sells itself. Why do I need somebody like you to do SEO? And I'm like, okay.
Exactly.
Let's have this conversation. So I feel like you've had this conversation with plenty of people, too.
Oh, yeah, and they're the same guys that say that their shit is the best shit.
Oh, my shit's the best shit. Yep. Nobody else can touch it.
Yep.
I've got bio-proprietary, get to the chopper, seeds and everything else, and nobody else can even come close to it.
Yeah, I
And
like
then-
to call my strain redheaded stepchild. You might want to work on that name. No way, it's the best
No.
name that's ever been a
No.
Canada strain.
Do you know we have to call strains cultivars now? Did you know that?
Well,
Is that what it
that's
is
their
now?
technical term, isn't it?
Well, it is. And do you
Yeah.
know that? Do you know that strains have everything to do with viruses and bacteria and nothing to do with horticulture or botanics
I've heard this. And sometimes people call them strands.
or flavors in New York?
Flavors, I like that. But how do you help that person that has the best weed and doesn't need any marketing help? Do you just not take them as a client?
No, I don't think those people exist. You know,
Oh.
I think that, you know, to a certain degree, back in the day, weed sold itself. Whatever your dealer had is what you would take.
Well, when you couldn't go to a store and
That's
you just
right.
you just
Right.
had the guy with the cell phone, or you had the street corner or the spot where you knew to pick up.
Right.
You're out of
yeah,
weed.
yeah. What strain was it? It was like, what was weird is like back in the day, and I feel like we're all of the age where it's like it was either just Mexican brickweed, you know, and you were buying seeds and stems. And then they started introducing the hydroponics, and you'd start picking up stuff in the wonderful glass
so it was
jars.
brown or green,
It was
right?
brown or green, but every once in a while you get something with some purple or some whatever. And I grew up on the East Coast, so there was like perp, and then there was chocolate, and there was some, and then hydro came on. You know, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm just reminiscing.
Well, but now, right? So now with so many dispensaries and
right,
so much
and so many
choice,
cultivators and so many
That's
people
right.
doing the genetics.
So sure, someone might walk into a dispensary
Mm-hmm.
and they're looking to purchase something, but what they choose off the shelf is a different story. That's where it gets really interesting.
Yes, I got myself one of them Ganjier certificates so that I could.
Look at you.
That's just, so well,
That's
I'm,
like a
I'm
sommelier
evidently
for
supposed
cannabis.
to like
Yes.
open a dispensary later this year, and say I have to understand the customers, which is tricky sometimes because then you have to ask them questions about, well, what are you going for?
What are you looking for?
Yeah, what do you like? Are you using? How are you going to use this? And then from those open-ended questions, you can make recommendations.
This is true.
Yeah.
Open-ended questions are really good questions, unless you're trying to lead them down a sales funnel. You know, generally speaking, it's like you want to kind of guide the conversation to a sale, but what do I know?
So when I talk to my clients, I often ask them, so what's the product you're creating? Who are the customers you're speaking to? And then I take them down the additive or subtractive path.
Ooh.
So additive is you're consuming this to enhance something you're doing. Let's say you're taking a hike or you're painting or you're
Going to a concert.
going to a concert.
Right.
Subtractive
Party
is
with friends.
you want to go to sleep, you have back pain, so on and so forth. The mindset and the need state between somebody that wants to enhance something versus someone that wants to alleviate something or pain is totally different. So therefore, the marketing becomes different. Therefore, even if the product is the same in the package, you're now talking to a different type of client or a different need state or mindset. So it's important to think about those things.
What are your favorite clients? Like, what types of clients do you really just love to help?
I love to help clients that actually know who their customers are.
Oh, it's
that's
such
tough.
a really, you know, we were having this conversation last night, Tom.
Yes.
Yeah, where it's like, do you understand your audience? Because I know, I run an SEO company, right? And we get a lot of people that come in, they're like, we just want to sell to everybody. And I'm like, that is going to make for when you try to sell to everybody, you end up making your entire, you have no brand. You know what I mean?
Right.
You become essentially like Walmart. But even Walmart has a very specific target demographic of who they sell to. You know, you have to understand your audience. You have to understand who you're selling to, and you have to understand who your client avatar is and what they're looking for, so that you can cater everything that you do to attract those people that you want to deal with.
That's right.
Versus everybody likes weed, so they're
Sure
just going to
do.
buy from me. You know what I mean? Like, what?
Right.
Okay, so that's fantastic. Everybody likes sex. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that.
Not everybody likes
Well,
sex.
you okay? You know what I mean? But you'd think as the human race progresses and as we continue to expand, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, so here's
you,
the
you need to be picky about who you choose.
absolutely. Here's life is all about choices,
I don't
right?
know if that makes sense.
There's a lot of choices in life.
There's a lot of choices in life.
Here's the thing. I always say to people, "Who is your client?" And usually they'll say everybody, and then I'll narrow them down and say, "Well, it's 21 plus. It's not everybody," and I start to take them there.
Right.
But you know, when they can't answer that question, it's like, who do you want your client to be? Who would be your perfect client, right?
Right.
Because then you get to a place where it's like, okay, this is who we want to cater to, or this is what's meaningful to me. So, you know, I always take people through, I have 4 pillars of a meaningful cannabis brand. You want to hear it?
Oh,
Yes,
look at you! You've
that's
got like a
why
whole
you're
thing
here.
for this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know it's funny, we don't get a lot of this deep dive information. So yeah, I'm curious. What are the 4
I feel
pillars?
like I'm being too serious for you
No.
guys.
Well, that's all right,
This
it's
is
all right.
good. Like we're both marketers, so like we like talking marketing
I
stuff.
was going
So
to get a rubber chicken.
oh, damn it!
You know, just like we'll just do a small sight gag, and then we can get back to the real, because that's why people are tuning in. They aren't tuning in to see us like, you know, act like trained circus seals. They're tuning in for your
To
wisdom.
learn. Yeah.
What are these 4 pillars?
All right, 4 pillars. So the first thing is, as we were just talking about, is who is your target customer?
Okay.
And if you don't know who they are, who is your perfect customer?
Gotcha.
Right? So if you think about psychographics, demographics, ethnographics, figure out who it is and what they want.
Good college words.
Okay, there
Yeah.
you go. Then the next pillar is where we get to really discrete or indiscrete use and consumption, right? So, which leads us into basically form factors. So you want to smoke a blunt, you want to smell like weed, that's one thing. If you are more careful about it, and for example, I probably shouldn't say this, but I will.
Say it.
My brother, who is not supposed to consume, according to his wife, does every evening with sublingual slips.
This never happens. This is a situational.
His brother will never
I have a
watch
brother who doesn't consume because whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I have a brother whose wife says he shouldn't consume, but he does.
And he does it in a way that she doesn't even understand it.
Right.
Right? So,
Right.
so he has fresh breath when he goes to sleep because it's a spearmint sublingual slip.
Right.
He takes it right before he goes to sleep. He actually sleeps. She's got fresh breath next to her. He's got his,
He gets his nap in, or he
That-
gets
Yeah.
that deep
Yeah,
core
he gets a
sleep.
deep
That's right.
sleep.
Yeah.
So in that sense, he's being discreet in his consumption.
Okay.
Right? So if we figure out indiscreet versus discreet, that moves us into form factor. After form factor, then we get into bioavailability, uptake, and dosing, which is really important. So if we could figure that out, that's amazing. And then finally we get to, so again, who's your target customer? What's their need state? And how are they consuming? What are they consuming, discrete or indiscreet? Then finally we get to all the dosing and all the other things. Again, I spoke about additive or subtractive. What's their mindset? What's their ritual? What's their habit, if you will? And then finally, so we address that, and then finally we come to the brand archetype. And in my first book, I called out 14 cannabis brand archetypes.
Oh.
And so a few things on that. One, they're not mutually exclusive, so you could have multiple types of brand archetypes layered on top of each other. But essentially, I'll just run through them super quickly. There's novelty, there's foodie, there's charity, there's cultivator, there's celebrity, etc. There's gender, there's a whole bunch. So let's just take Whoopi and Maya. Whoopi Goldberg is a celebrity. That's the celebrity novelty.
Okay.
Or rather, celebrity brand archetype. There's a charity component to the brand, so it's charity, and it's women focused. So she's taken these 3
So they have a very
archetypes.
specific audience that they're
That's right.
that
That's who they're
they're
talking to.
appealing to.
Right.
You know what I mean? That are looking for them. They're like, we identify with you.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So now that you know what their need state is, when they consume, how they consume, what they're looking to consume, and then you know who they are, you can create a brand archetype that appeals to them and speaks to them. So the brand archetype is a shortcut, right? You know, if you're into sustainability and you walk down the aisle at Whole Foods and you see something with craft paper and soy ink and, it's blue and green, you're like, okay, this is a language I understand. This speaks to me. And so once we sort of cover those 4 pillars, we actually get to a place where we're speaking the language of that consumer. We're offering them a product that's meaningful to them and that resonates with them. And that's how we do it. For the most part, cannabis brands are, green leaves. That's what we've got in our
There's
industry.
a lot of that. There's a lot of that.
So how
Yes.
do we differentiate? And then that's why, coming back to your questions, both of you, that's why we differentiate by thinking about who our client is and how do we appeal to them instead of being another, innuendo with a green logo on it.
Yes, yes. The innuendo is in the green logos. They're everywhere. But I also don't like, and this is another part of the industry that I'm not the biggest fan of, has nothing really to do with marketing or branding. Journalists think that any story about the industry needs a pun in its headline. What is up with that? But that's just a gripe.
That's super disappointing to me. The only
Like,
pun,
let's be buddies.
the only pun I
Anything like
like
that.
is the a cannabis suppository called innuendo.
Innuendo.
Hey now.
Yeah.
You like that one?
Yeah. I think that's, if I was going to
That goes along with Bovada's moist joke.
But like that is a wonderful name, and like you could laugh your ass off. If
Yeah.
you put it up. Never mind.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually we were working on a tech thing that we were doing called Bud Plug, which would actually go really well with that. Let me ask you a question because I wrote a book.
You did.
Yeah, well, it's only on Amazon, but it was on cannabis SEO. When you do, this is book number 2. Okay, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, this particular book, I was in Olympia, Washington at the
Okay.
Capitol, and this politician came up to me after this big meeting, and he said, you don't use marijuana, do you? Because you don't look like you use marijuana.
Oh, okay.
He has a
that's
judgment in
that's
his
a
head
that's a
that
good
he's projecting
stereotype
on
right
you.
there. Yeah.
And so I said, I don't use marijuana. I consume cannabis. And his head started to spin on his shoulders.
What do you mean? Yeah.
That's right. So,
Yeah.
so that was the beginning of the book, right? But the real reason behind the book is to create the ability for our industry to use words that are meaningful, that can bridge the gap between those that are outside of the industry and those that are in the industry. And why? Because we're trying to normalize the plant.
Right.
So if we're trying to normalize the plant, folks like the three of us all speak the same language. We could joke about it. We understand what's going on. There's so many people out there that think cannabis is bad, that don't understand cannabis. And so if we're going to start to normalize it, we need to start to speak their language. And one of the analogies I use is if I said to somebody, let's talk about gun control.
Okay.
Oh, not in this country.
Trigger word.
That's
Trigger
right.
warning.
There you go. So immediately you see where that's going.
Absolutely.
But if I said, let's talk about responsible gun ownership.
Okay.
Now-
It's all it is a weird kind of twist on how you place the words together.
It is, but
Yeah.
I won't get shut down,
Right.
and the conversation
Right.
continues.
Right.
And so there are words like, cannabis versus marijuana. There are words like adult use versus recreational. Adult use implies responsibility. It implies all these other things where recreational.
It's like party.
It's a good time.
Well,
Yeah,
recreational,
exactly.
you think camping. You know what I mean? Like when
Exactly.
you're like, oh, we're just gonna go out in the woods and get fucking hammered. Like, yeah. Versus like adult use. I'm just gonna use consumer. You know, it's kind of like it's all the liquor ads where it's like use responsibly.
That's
you know what I
right.
mean? We're doing the water break. You know, the commercial where they're just brought to you
Pounding
by
beers, and then they have
pounding
a
beers,
water
and it's
break.
like water break, and they just hand out the water for everybody to hydrate so that you don't pass out.
And then even strain, like we said earlier, right? Strain has everything to do with viruses and bacteria, nothing to do with botanics or horticulture. So, why the industry even uses that is crazy. But as we start to normalize and as things start to globalize, we need to talk the language of researchers and scientists and politicians and doctors and policymakers in order for them to understand where we're coming from, and in
Right.
order for them to understand that this is a plant which has therapeutic value, and it's really important for us to have that conversation instead of, the typical stoner talk, which always leads us to a place where you go from, do you use marijuana, then it goes into abuse, then it goes back into, it's the gateway drug.
Right.
You know,
Right?
what's really funny is it used to just be weed. You know what I mean? Like nobody even used these big words like cannabis and marijuana. It was like I'm just gonna go buy some weed. You know what I mean? Or like, I think there's it's good to see the evolution of that to like where at least now we're using multiple syllable words that like, or versus like weed, dope, smoke, trees, bud. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Well, the
Takes a little more effort.
the
Yeah,
origin
or
of the
if you go
term
back to like
marijuana-
Cheech and Chong goes over there, it's like, well, let's go cop a lid. You know,
Right,
that's,
right. But then they used the terminology against us 85 years ago because it was already known as cannabis indica with doctors. And so they started calling it marijuana, and the doctors don't know what that meant. And so there's actually congressional testimony from the AMA's general counsel saying like, hey, you keep calling this stuff marijuana. We don't know what you're talking
Right.
about. The doctors call it cannabis indica, and we have no idea what these headlines are about. But I did want to thank David for coming on the podcast and sharing some wisdom about how to brand in cannabis.
Absolutely. So where do people buy your book?
On Amazon, of course.
On Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay. How many hard copies of these are you carrying around with you?
That's my last one. I gave out a shit ton today.
What the
Nice
hell? You
work.
guys, you should have came here first, and I would have liked. I mean, we could have a Tamita sign sponsor.
We'll work that out.
All right, we will work that out.
We could work that out.
David, it's been a pleasure having you on. We don't get a lot of authors on here. You know, we get a lot of brand. You know, like I don't know. I feel like what you're doing, like having the book published and doing everything else, is like helps educate and pass along. And this. It's not just like, hey, man, we're fighting for it. It's like you actually have a legitimate way to do this, and just reading the reviews on the back of your book.
Well, I'm trying. The funny thing is like, this is my second book, but I still don't consider myself an author.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not something I.
So it's not in your LinkedIn profile. You're like, I've written 2 books.
I wrote the first book on cannabis branding.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
You did write the first book on cannabis branding.
I did.
Shaking the hand of the man who wrote the first book on cannabis branding. Get to the chopper. Get the book on Amazon. It's very good.
And we will see
He's
you.
got a man shake here. I love it.
Next
You've got a really big hand.
I do have a really-
You've got an Arnold hand.
He
Get
does.
to the chopper. Come with me if you want to live. Read his book if you want to stay alive in cannabis. It's what you want to do.
Tune into the next episode of Meet Unshackled.
Yes.